Good evening, members and officers of the Council, members of the press and the public. I welcome you to this meeting of the Council. The fire procedures are as follows. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate via the stairs or through the security doors to my right or opposite the lifts in the foyer. Please do not use the lifts and then assemble in Hawley Square on the Green. Officers will assist you and advise when it's deemed safe to return to the chamber. The proceedings of this meeting will be recorded and subsequently broadcast on the internet. I would advise that if filming takes place, anyone in attendance in the public areas may have their image captured, and I urge anyone to filming proceedings to avoid filming members of the public, particularly if there are children present. Does anyone intend to film the meeting?
I don't need to worry about that.
Well, there we are. Thank you for that then. Just a comment then. Just a comment then about mobile phones. Please ensure they're turned to silent and are not used to make or receive phone calls in the chamber whilst this meeting is in progress. Agenda item number 1 then is apologies for absence. We have apologies from Councillor Glenn Coleman-Cook. Are there any other apologies?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Constantine.
Councillor Gary Hillman.
Agenda item number 2 then, the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held here on the 1st of December 2016. I move that the minutes of that meeting be approved and signed as a correct record. Would the Vice Chairman please second?
Seconded, sir.
Do members agree? Thank you. Agenda item number 3. It has come to our attention, so therefore it is with regret that I announce that Barry Coppock has recently passed away. Mr. Coppock was a councillor from 1991 to 2003 and was chairman of this council 2002-2003. I'm sure council will join me in expressing sympathy to Mr. Coppock's family. I would now like to invite all members to stand for a moment's silence, please, in respect of the late Mr. Coppock. Served with the late Mr. Coppock. Would anybody like to mention a few words? Right, thank you. I'll begin with Councillor Matterface, please.
Thank you, Chair. I didn't serve with Barry, but I've known him for many, many years as an absolute stalwart of the Labour Party. Barry said to me once that everything he'd gained in public life, he'd gained through being involved with the trade union movement and with the Labour Party. He was very proud to say, I have done every job in the Labour Party, from cleaning toilets, washing windows. He'd been a ward leader in London, he had been a councillor, and when they moved to Thanet, he represented Newington ward for 12 years, and his wife Jackie, who had represented St Peter's, moved over to Newington, and they formed a couple, after whom, I think I'm right in saying, but no doubt someone will correct me, they may be the only pair of councillors who have a street named after them. They have Coppock Close in Newington named after them, and I know they were immensely proud of that. Barry had been a councillor for Newington, as I said, and he became leader of this council, and latterly, before he decided to step down, he was chair of the council and got very involved with community things. He got very involved in education, invited in head teachers, and I was the one that, because I worked in schools, he invited me to come and join them. He'd been battling cancer for a couple of years, but he managed to keep smiling. And until quite recently, he was still helping out the Northwood by-elections last year and the Newington by-elections earlier in the year. People who were voting in that ward would have seen Barry and his wife Jackie telling when people left the vote. He was extremely proud of what he'd achieved, and I'm happy to say that he passed away Tuesday morning with his wife and his 2 daughters beside him. Unfortunately, because there's a backlog of cremations, his funeral will not take place for at least 4 weeks, and I hope members who served with him or knew him through politics will be able to attend that funeral. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much, Chairman. There are a few of us who obviously served with Barry. I was elected in 1995, and of course Barry had been here for the previous 4 years, so I knew him in opposition, and I knew him when we took control in 1995. He was the deputy leader then to Harry Pickering, and then he became the leader, and later on, of course, chair of the council. He played many important roles within this council. He was the chair of the Regeneration Board, and that was a time when the Regeneration Board was very much accountable to elected members, and you know, Barry would make sure that all members were kept informed of what was happening. He had specific interests in health and housing and economic development. He was very proud and anxious to make sure we had all year-round jobs, because at that time in the 90s we were still very much seen as seasonal, and Barry's job very much was to get work for all year round. During his time we had SRB 5, SRB 6, European Objective 2 and other fundings, and we were able to get the Broadstairs campus and the Innovation Centre going, very much involved in making sure we had Sure Start and you know, decent standard in council housing, good homes for people. He also had a great sense of humour. He never stood up without saying in a packed meeting about health or whatever, "My name is Barry Coppock and I'm 62, I'm 65, 68, 72. Anytime I ever went to a meeting, I knew what age Barry was, because he, over the many years, would tell us his age as he stood up, and he would act as if he was an innocent abroad, which he certainly wasn't. He was absolutely on the ball in everything he did. And when the QEQM was under amazing threat of closure, and we had marches and candlelit vigils and everything, Barry and others, including Richard Nicholson, with officers Brian Lear and Brian Whitehead, made sure that this council was the lead in the campaign to save the QEQM. I'll never forget that. They did that. And Barry and I went up, I was a parliamentary candidate, up to the QEQM. They didn't want us photographed in there because it was a different political outfit at government level, and so we had our photos taken outside with anyone who wanted to be with us. But Barry was absolutely instrumental, and even in the last year I saw him at public health meetings still doing his bit, fighting for the people of Thanet about better health. He had, as I say, a great sense of humour, and one of the things I found about him was a row he had with Private Eye. Because he was such a strong trade unionist, he was insisting that the printing place he worked would not print Private Eye unless all the journalists were union. And he's quoted in I found it in a charity shop, this old Private Eye, and it was all about this man Barry Coppock that Willie Rushton had the row with. That was our Barry. His greatest claim to fame, anyone who's ever been the husband of a mayor, David and others will know this, but Barry used to joke about, "I'm going home to put my frock on, I'm going out as mayoress of Ramsgate this evening," because of course Jackie was the mayor of Ramsgate. He will be very, very sadly missed by all of us, because we are a family in our political parties. I think all of you must be the same. As Jenny says, the funeral won't be for a while. In fact, he didn't die from the cancer, he had pneumonia, and I spoke at length to Jackie this evening, and she's bearing up very well. Those of you who have great affection for her would like to know that she's bearing up very well. They have terrific family, terrific daughters. But he was a power in this council. He did amazing work for this community, and it's very good that somewhere was named after the 2 Coppocks. We used to say you'd weigh their votes in Newington, and even long after they were no longer the councillors, people used to ask where were the Coppocks to come and help them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Obviously, a lot of us are relatively new here, so we now have a picture of the man. Thank you very much. Councillor Hayton.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, I first met Barry in 91. I don't know whether he was a councillor before 91, but I certainly achieved the role of being a councillor. Barry wasn't just a Labour councillor, he was a district councillor who performed quite a lot of work other than political work. I don't know how he fitted in everything he did, because quite frankly, you know, he worked 36 hours a day doing things for the community and the people he represented. Not just the people he represented, I might add, but the whole of Thanet. And I'm quite happy that he became leader of the Labour group in '99. Well, he was deputy leader in '99, and obviously he did quite a lot of work on behalf of the community then as well. And everybody that knew Barry respected what he did. Jackie, his wife, was mayor, as has been said, and they both took the job as what it was, a 24-hour job, plus everything else, I might add, Chairman, that they did together. And I heard from the first time from you this evening, and it's a sad loss to not only the community, but to me personally. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bayford.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I mean, everything's really been said, but I'd just like to add a few words. Probably goes without saying that politically we didn't agree on too many things, Barry and I. And he was a fierce opponent in this chamber. And that was in the good old days when you really could take lumps out of each other. But what you could always rely on, that once you walked outside, that was put to one side, absolutely, completely. What I would just like to say, he was an absolute fierce champion for Thanet, and really does deserve the respect of everybody, you know, that was with him at the time and has followed since. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Tomlinson, please.
Thank you, Chair. Again, much has been said, which brings back to mind. I first got to know Barry way back in 1995 at a meeting at the Old Town Hall here in Margate, and it was regarding the Turner, when things started going there. But I got to know him and his Jackie, his wife, fairly well with various organisations that I was involved in. And also, most people here know I've been privileged to be the mayor of our town here. And it was an occasion, and this is how I've remembered him, and I've only heard about this minutes ago from Councillor Johnson. He's passed away. But we went to a function for the Mayor of Ramsgate, which was Councillor Steve Ward at the time, Albion House, where we all had to dress up as gnomes. And that may sound a bit funny coming from me, but I'm a gnome myself tonight. But I can see Barry and Jackie done up, and he wasn't very big anyway, Jackie was, and if you can picture gnomes jumping over fences, it's something I will never forget. But lovely person, and it's come as a shock to myself as well tonight. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Saunders, please.
Thank you. Well, we've all heard this evening Barry, the politician. Obviously, my politics differed with Barry, but we had probably kept it quiet because we had long conversations on a certain subject, and he, like myself, was a lifelong supporter of a certain football team from South London, the ones that play in red and white. So you can imagine that we put our political differences to side and had some very long conversations about the days when footballers, again, like Councillor Bayford has said, footballers were allowed to kick what's-its out of one another, back in the good old days of leather footballs, boots and leather balls. So lovely character, and both Councillor Maeve and myself shared a lot of interest with Barry and his wife with regards to the Twinning Association. He was very active in the Ramsgate Twinning Association, and we've been active in the Broadstairs Association. So a lovely man, a near neighbour of mine, and a sad loss. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much for all those tributes to Barry Coppock. If you'd be so kind, as soon as you know when the funeral is, if you could let me know, I will endeavour to attend as chairman to represent the council. Thank you for all those warm memories of him. Agenda item number 4 then, declaration of interests. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Campbell.
We are going to discuss later on the members' allowance, aren't we? Over-generous allowance, may I add.
Absolutely.
Mr Howes, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, all members have a general dispensation to discuss members' allowances.
Mid-year Treasury report then, agenda item number 5 for 2016-17. I call upon Councillor Townend, please.
Thank you, Chair. This report is required in accordance with the CIPFA Code of Practice on Treasury Management. During the first half of 2016-17, the Council complied with the requirements of its annual investment strategy. Borrowing was only undertaken for a capital purpose, and the statutory borrowing limit, the authorised limit, was not breached. The period continued to be challenging investment environment with low investment returns. This report was considered by the Governance and Audit Committee on the 7th of December 2016 and Cabinet on the 17th of January. I move that Council approves the recommendations.
Thank you. Is there a seconder, please?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Fairbrass. Members,
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to repeat the appreciative comments that I made at Cabinet a while ago. I think people thought I was joking, waiting for the punchline, but actually I was being deadly serious. We have this highly technical and detailed report prepared for members, and to just nod it through without comment doesn't do justice to the Treasury Management team. At a time when finances are stretched, the professionalism of our Treasury Management team is never more needed. TDC Treasury Management adheres obviously to the SIPFA Accountancy Code of Practice, uses in-house expertise with expert advice and guidance from Capita, and a detailed reading of the report, which I'm sure we've all done, shows that every area of Treasury Management is covered, every risk assessed, all investment accounts managed, and regularly the terms of every loan reviewed. So I think that we should feel very pleased that we've got such a good Treasury Management team, and I'll happily support the approval of this report. Thank you, Chair.
thank you very much. Do members agree?
May I just thank you on behalf of the team for your kind remarks.
Thank you very much. Do members agree? Thank you. Agenda item number 6, the Treasury Management Strategy for 2017-18, and I would advise members that in accordance with Council Procedure Rule 17.6, I will call for a recorded vote on the motion or any amendments or substantive motions. I call once more on Councillor Townend, please.
Thank you, Chair. This report is required in accordance with the CIPFA Code of Practice on Treasury Management. It covers the Council's capital plans, Treasury Management Strategy, Treasury indicators, prudential indicators, and limits for the 2017-18 to 2019-20 inclusive, and the minimum revenue provision policy and investment strategy for 2017-18. This report was considered by the Governance and Audit Committee on the 7th of December 2016 and Cabinet on the 17th of January. I move that Council approves the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Townend. Is there a seconder, please?
Second, Mr. Chairman, reserve the right.
Thank you, Councillor Wells. Would you like to ditto also, Councillor Townsend? Councillor Gregory's words of appreciation for the financial strategy team and the good work that they've done. So, thank you very much. Councillor Wells?
I'd just like to say that Officer Ditto is grateful.
I now need to instruct the monitoring officer to conduct the recorded vote.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Ashby. Councillor Bainbridge. Councillor Bayford. Councillor Braidwood. Councillor Brim. Councillor Buckley. Councillor Campbell. Councillor Keith Coleman Cook. Councillor Connor. Councillor Crowe-Brown. Councillor Curran. Councillor Dawson. Councillor Day. Councillor Della. Councillor Dennis. Councillor Dexter. Councillor Dixon. Councillor Edwards. Councillor Eleanor. Councillor Evans. Councillor Jeremy Fairbrass. Councillor Lynn Fairbrass. Councillor Falcon. Councillor Fenner. Councillor Game. Councillor Ian Gregory. Councillor Ken Gregory. Councillor Grove. Councillor Hayton. Councillor Howes. Councillor J. Jones. Councillor Johnston. Councillor Larkins. Councillor Martin. Councillor Matterface. Councillor Parsons. Councillor Partington. Councillor Linda Piper. Councillor Reverend Stuart Piper.
Agreed.
Councillor Roy Potts. Councillor Linda Potts. Councillor Rogers. Councillor Rizecki. Councillor David Saunders. Councillor Maeve Saunders. Councillor Savage. Councillor Shonk. Councillor Stummer-Smertsing. Councillor Taylor. Councillor Taylor-Smith. Councillor Tomlinson. Councillor Townend. Councillor Wells. Thank you.
Agenda item number 7. Changes to the 2016-17 capital programme and the 2017-18 to 2020-21 capital plan. Once more, I was advised in accordance with Council Procedure Rule 17.6, I'll call for a recorded vote on the motion or amendments or substantive motions. I'll call again, please, on Councillor Townend.
Thank you, Chair. This report sets out progress on delivering this year's capital programme and revisions to the capital programme for 2017-18 onwards. Largely due to a number of projects being deferred, forecast capital expenditure is 1.3 million less than originally planned. Details regarding expenditure and funding changes are set out in section 2. Changes to the capital programme for future years are set out in section 3. The major risk attached to the programme is the need to fund a proportion of it from capital receipts. Asset disposals are required that generate sufficient receipts to fund some of the existing programme, as well as to fund a proportion of the changes in this report. If receipts are not generated, capital projects will have to be cancelled or deferred. Cabinet approved this report on the 17th of January. Since then, there has been a change in the value of slippage in this year's programme, but this will be reported in the Q3 monitoring. I move that Council approves the recommendations.
Councillor Townend, is there a seconder, please?
Seconded, Mr Chairman. Reserve the right.
Thank you. Councillor Gregory.
Thank you, Chairman. This report, or earlier versions of it, have been before other committees, but each time it surfaces, this report, there are always slight changes to it, I've noticed. This time, in 2.8, it tells us that the urgent decision by the Cabinet member on the 9th of November approved an overspend of £679,000 at the port and identified that £320,000 was to come from reserves and the balance from capital receipts, except that it didn't, because if you have a look at the report, the member's decision, all it says there is that we're increasing the project value of 664k to 1,180k. Now, Chairman, as you know, I did try to ask the question about where this was going to come from at the last council meeting, and I was prevented from asking that question. Only now what we find is that the answer has been slipped into this report in just a few words, and there we are. It's another raid on the actual reserves, as we can see. Now, of course, we're being asked to approve a capital expenditure change, being a reduction to the capital programme of 1.33 million, but with the addition of 3 new projects. This is to be achieved, as Councillor Townend said, by deferring 4 projects into the next financial year and cancelling 1 other. This decrease is to balance the books, because as a result of a reduction in the capital receipts of 1.06 million, this has grown from 800,000, which was reported to Cabinet in November. So it's jumped up quite a lot since then. Next year we have a capital programme being proposed that relies on 1.78 million of capital receipts. And you have to ask where the extra capital finance will come from, because the report suggests that it will be coming from an intended 4-year asset disposal plan, which as yet is not prepared. Or it might be coming from a possible new lease in the port, but it says there in 1.3, as yet uncertain. So there is no doubt that these new projects are worthy if the funding was available, and who wouldn't want handrails to stop revellers falling into the harbour. But this programme is dependent on capital income, and there is no evidence to assure us that this will be available. We all know what happens with capital asset sales. We list them, then we go to consultation, and then they get delisted. There is no guarantee that the income will be available, and presumably we'll end up deferring projects into 2018-19, yet again to balance the books. When we look at the corporate implications of not approving the changes in this report, it says failure to undertake this process will impact on the Council's compliance with the Treasury Management Code of Practice. Well, I have to say to members that approving a plan without any guarantee that the funds will be available does exactly the same. I think we should stop increasing expenditure until we know we have the income. And I was preparing to put forward an amendment on this, but I realise it's almost the same for agenda item 9 as well, so I shall save it until then. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I would like to thank the officers for including there on page 55, 3.1, Mark 2, the railings at Margate, because we have been asking for this for a very, very long time, and I think it's a tragedy that some people had to be so badly injured, and in fact somebody died there, and I know there's reasons why this happens, but I'm very glad to see that there, and I'm glad of the officers who did listen to us about this one. The reason I particularly was asking questions was about the CCTV. In November 2014, an officer produced a report with us to say that we needed to upgrade this. In fact, there was new technology available and we're reaching the end of its life. The police were going to put some funding towards it, so we were on standby waiting to hear more about this money from the police to help us to do it. I think it was just over 300,000 at that time. It didn't happen this year, it didn't happen the year before, and now it's into the year of 2017-2018. I emailed the officer, Mr. Snook, to ask had contracts been let, had we any dates for starting, how serious was it, and it's only a few days, but I haven't heard back from him. I just wonder if any officer or any member can tell us, have you got any further with contracts, and if this is going to happen, and is our CCTV in a sound state? The other one for me was 2.2 on page 54, the swimming pool at Hartsdown. An amazing amount of work was done on Hartsdown swimming pool many years ago, again in Barry Coppock's time and Richard Nicholson's time, refurbishment. But one of the things that needed to be done was an upgrading of the disabled facilities and the loos. And when I spoke to a resident a few months ago, I was told it was still in a bad way. I don't know if you've done anything since, but if you haven't, I don't know if it's wise to remove this £30,000 from there if we still have a problem. I'd be pleased to hear you've sorted it, but if you haven't, I think we need to be compliant. The big one, again, for my own ward, of course, is the Fort Hotel, and that's HRA money, and I should have probably mentioned in the previous item, but I don't see it anywhere in any report. and it's still a derelict site. I keep being told progress is being made. I have to apologise to residents in my ward all the time. We allocated 900,000 from the HRA account to that building. The hope for me was that we would free up 4- and 3-bedroomed houses and put some of our older people into lovely new flats overlooking the sea in our social housing. And I don't think it's in any of our reports tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Wells, please.
The interesting comments, I think, probably are something that people have had lots of opportunities to deal with. I think Councillor Gregg himself made the point that he had been raising some of these issues, and I know there was a certain attempt to answer, and I think it was a matter of maths, wasn't it? And so you couldn't add up in the same way, and maybe it was about accountancy maths rather than anything else. And certainly I'm not entirely happy with some of the programme that we inherited and what we've had to do in order to deal with it. But it is true to say that there is a more active and ongoing asset disposal programme that has been in this council for some time. It's not moving quite as quickly as we would have hoped, but I do know that we did actually make some sales on Monday, and that we made good prices on those particular sales, and that I'd hope that therefore, as that moves through the next few months and through the next financial year, that we would see this money actually appear and fund those particular projects. And whilst it is fine to say that we shouldn't actually go ahead and fund anything unless we can absolutely guarantee every penny of the price, it's very difficult to absolutely guarantee every penny of the price when you face budget changes of £1 million coming down from government at the end of December in terms of our revenue budget that impact upon everything that we do, and leave us with just a few weeks to actually make those calculations and make it work. So in many ways, these things represent our best possible guesses and our best possible estimates, and trying to make sure that they're spent in the best possible ways for the benefit of residents. And that remains our concern and our commitment, and this is the way that we see that it moves perhaps forward as best it can with capital, and we hope that you'll feel that you can support it in the round and in the whole.
Thank you, Councillor Wells. Councillor Townend, were there any other words you wanted to add?
Yes, Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank Councillor Gregory insofar as he admits he does now nearly understand the figures, which is a great move on. Secondly, pardon? Thank you. The second point was Councillor Johnson on the CCTV. There we are awaiting modern technology and making sure that the new system is fit for purpose and up to date rather than jumping in too quickly. So please bear with us. And the final point was on the Fort Road, and that is going ahead in the programme at the moment. Thank you. My apologies. And if I could only read my own writing, I would actually reply to you. That we'll get back to you later. What a super answer. Thank you.
I'm relieved to see that you can nearly see the figures, Councillor Townend. Thank you very much.
Chair. Particularly the Fort Hotel.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, I did ask a question about this 30,000 because initially I thought it was for Ramsgate, which really interested me. However, as I found out, it doesn't say so. However, when I found out it's a Hartstown, the response I got from one of the officers was that no project had been identified. Therefore, that's why the £30,000 had been cut. If, however, there needs to be compliance for disabled facilities at Hartstown, then that should be a project the £30,000 could be spent on. Therefore, it should be identified and put back in the budget.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. You caught me out there. I'd already gone for this. Thank you for that. Councillor Townend, having delivered a summary, thank you very much. I'll now ask Mr Howes to conduct the recorded vote.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Ashby. Councillor Bainbridge. Councillor Bayford. Councillor Braidwood. Councillor Brim. Councillor Buckley. Councillor Campbell. Councillor Keith Coleman-Cook. Councillor Connor. Councillor Crowe-Brown. Councillor Curran. Councillor Dawson. Councillor Day. Councillor Della. Councillor Dennis. Councillor Dexter. Councillor Dixon. Councillor Edwards. Councillor Eleanor. Councillor Evans. Councillor Jeremy Fairbrass. Councillor Lynn Fairbrass. Councillor Falcon. Councillor Fenner. Councillor Game. Councillor Gregory. Ian Gregory, I apologise. Okay. Councillor Ken Gregory. Councillor Grove. Councillor Hayton. Councillor Howes. Councillor J. Jones. Councillor Johnston. Councillor Larkins. Councillor Martin. Councillor Matterface. Councillor Parsons. Councillor Partington. Councillor Piper. Councillor Stuart Piper.
Agreed.
Councillor Roy Potts. Councillor Linda Potts. Councillor Rogers. Councillor Rizecki. Councillor David Saunders. Councillor Maeve Saunders. Councillor Savage. Councillor Shonk. Councillor Stummer-Smirtsing. Councillor Taylor. Councillor Taylor-Smith. Councillor Tomlinson. Councillor Townend. Councillor Wells.
Thank you very much, members. That's been passed. Thank you. Agenda item number 8 then is the Members' Allowance Scheme for 2017-18. I move that the recommendation as set out in the report be adopted. Would the Vice Chairman please second?
Seconded.
Councillor Johnson.
Chair, I spoke to colleagues before this evening's meeting because I thought I might have missed something, but in the past elected members were invited to meet this panel and say what account for yourself for every minute of every day. It's some years now since I've ever been asked to come to meet these people. I don't know, does any group or any member get invited to talk to them and account for the hours we spend as councillors and whether we're value for money? Thank you.
Yes, please.
Councillors normally attend the quadrennial review meeting and are issued with invites for that. I will ask Dover District Council, who are the people who organise it on our behalf and administer the East Kent Joint Independent Remuneration Panel, to be a bit more proactive with their advertising of the meetings for you.
Thank you, Mr Hughes. Do members agree? Thank you. Number 9, Budget and Medium-Term Financial Strategy 2017 to 2021. Once more, I advise in accordance with Council Procedure Rule 17.6. I'll call for a recorded vote on the motion or amendments or substantive motions. Councillor Townend, please.
Thank you, Chair. This report presents the budget for the General Fund Housing Revenue Account and capital budgets for the financial year 2017-18. The Council is continuing to face significant cuts in government funding over the next few years, and with substantial savings already having been made in recent years, it is becoming increasingly difficult to identify further savings without impacting on services. However, I am pleased to announce that the budget proposals before you tonight present a number of income-generating proposals as well as savings, which have enabled me to propose a balanced budget for 2017-18 with a minimum impact on services. The funding pressures are substantial in respect of 2017-18. Government funding has been reduced primarily in respect of the Revenue Support Grant, which has been reduced by 1 million compared to 2016-17, and the New Homes Bonus, which has been similarly reduced by 1 million. After adding in inflationary pressures, the pensions revaluation and other adjustments, there is forecast to be a gross budget gap of 2.6 million. The positive news is that there are proposals in this report to bridge that gap. Cabinet has been working with officers for many months to develop the proposals, and many of you will have been briefed informally on details at specifically arranged budget briefing sessions, in addition to the normal channels. Council has already approved increases to fees and charges, which will generate an additional £490,000. Further income generation plans set out in paragraph 4.2 are in train for planning, housing, car parking, power generation and the workshop. A new Thanet lottery is also expected to generate net income to fund local good causes which would otherwise be vulnerable to budget reductions. Efficiencies will also be delivered, reducing the cost of services delivered by contractors and partners as well as council services. In light of the substantial reduction in government funding in 2017-18, and to enable the Council to set a realistic, deliverable budget, there is assumed one-off drawdown of reserves of £450,000. This is not proposed lightly, as the Council's well-documented reserves position is not healthy. To mitigate risk, the £450,000 will be drawn from earmarked reserves, not the general contingency. Importantly, the £450,000 is projected to be repaid over the period of the medium-term financial strategy, replenishing reserves to their current level. As regards the medium-term financial strategy, it is referenced in Section 8 and set out in detail in Annex 1. There are, as ever, substantial uncertainties over the next 4 years, but one perennial uncertainty has been removed, in that the government has committed to fixing funding of Revenue Support Grant up to including 2019-20, although this funding will be zero by the end of the 4-year period of the medium-term financial strategy. The outcome of the New Homes Bonus review was particularly bad for districts, including Thanet, as the government seeks to redirect funding to social care, which is delivered by the county. Other uncertainties relate to business rates localisation, which would change the nature of funding of local government. There are still very few clues from government as to how this will be implemented, and the MTFS before you does not try to anticipate the impact of the changes. The General Fund Capital Programme is described in sections 11 to 13. It reflects the proposed changes in the programme that are set out elsewhere on this Council agenda, and the detailed programme is in Annex 2. The Housing Revenue Account budget is detailed in Section 14, and the HRA Capital Programme is in Section 15 to 16. This budget presumes an increase in council tax of £4.95 on a Band D property, which equates to 2.31%. Council on the 23rd of February will approve the council tax for 2017-18. I move that Council approves the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Townend. Is there a seconder, please?
Seconder, Mr Chairman, reserve the right.
Thank you, Councillor Wells. Councillor Gregory?
That was a guess, yeah. Thank you, Chairman. Interestingly, this report has a number of negative inferences relating to the Council's ability to achieve projected capital receipts. Leaders referred to it, Councillor Townsend referred to it. Section 511 states that capital receipts are projected to be 2 million, and yet we know that we don't yet have a capital asset disposal programme, and we're still uncertain about the possible lease renewals. Section 12.2 is where the possibility of not achieving sufficient disposals in 2017-18 is considered, with a suggestion that insufficient disposals will result in the need to reduce or defer the capital programme or to borrow more. So how likely is it that we'll be able to achieve this figure of 2 million? Probably more likely if the 1.8 million balance of the Royal Sands development is utilised, because it keeps stating in reports that this income hasn't been allocated. Is this to reassure the people of Ramsgate that the funds are still there, when in fact 1.75 million has already been allocated? There are in this report 28 projects on the capital programme. Now, the lowest score in 5 projects require a total of 815,000 of capital receipts. Rather than wait until the capital income requirement is not achieved and a report comes back to us to defer the projects, I'd like to propose an amendment to Recommendation 1 on page 73, and that is that members approve the draft medium-term financial strategy at Annex 1, but at the commencement of the lowest scoring 5 capital projects at an estimated cost of 815,000 is deferred until Cabinet agrees that sufficient capital receipts are available. I think that makes sense. Unfortunately, the lowest scoring project is Margate Harbour Railings. Absolutely lowest. After that, it's the low carbon plan Ramsgate Harbour, the Ramsgate Aqua Stores, the Ramsgate Harbour Water Supply and Dreamland Car Park. Now, I'm not suggesting that we postpone these or cancel these. I'm just saying let's defer them until Cabinet decides there is sufficient capital to go forward with the plan. Did you want this, Chairman?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Charlie. Thank you very much. So I just read this out again. The suggestion is that members approve the draft medium-term financial strategy at Annex 1, but that the commencement of the lowest scoring 5 capital projects at an estimated cost of 815,000 is deferred until Cabinet agrees that sufficient capital receipts are available. For avoidance of doubt, the lowest scoring projects are, number 1, the Margate Harbour Railings, 2, low carbon plan Ramsgate Harbour, 3, Ramsgate Aqua Stores, 4, Ramsgate Harbour Water Supply, and 5, Dreamland Car Park Enhancement. Do we have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Bayford. I note some councillors have already asked to speak on the original motion, but is there anybody wish to add any comments to this amendment? Okay, in that case... I'm sorry.
Mr. Willis.
Mr. Willis, yes, thank you very much, Mr. Willis.
Thank you, Chairman. It was just a bit of context, really. The capital programme is funded largely by capital receipts, that component of it, which is a movable feast. So the capital receipts, we're in the process of making disposals and the level of capital receipts is going up, so we may have enough to fund the capital programme. The other thing that's going on is the capital programme is changing all the time. Sometimes a project has to be deferred. It's not a choice, it just gets slipped by a year. So if we're anticipating now what could be the situation in a number of months' time, it could be that one of those lowest scoring projects could go ahead, and a higher scoring project, officers have concluded that it's impossible to go ahead, so we would let that one slip. If Council makes the decision now to enforce the 5 lowest scoring projects in anticipation of circumstances not changing, then it might be that they might not be the right ones. It will end up, we'll have another project being slipped because it's going to slip anyway, plus those 5, and we'll end up with an overfunded capital programme.
Councillor Wells, please.
I think that latter point really is the most important one. Whilst it would be nice to end up with an overfunded capital programme, it's not something I can remember happening in this council for a very long time. We are mindful of the fact that the programme itself is one that has to be monitored closely throughout the year, and I hope that your attention to detail, Councillor Gregory, will help us monitor that very closely as the year goes on. But I do think it is important that there may be some serious external factor that takes something of our higher scoring project out of the programme in due course, and if we did that, having made this decision in that particular way, I think we actually limit the flexibility we might have to actually move those things around. So I accept the general thrust of your concern. I don't think this is a particularly helpful way of actually dealing with it, and I'll be delighted to welcome you into monitoring closely how we have to deal with it if the worst of those happenings occurs en route.
Thank you, Councillor Wells. Councillor Gregory.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, it's great to know that you know, there is every likelihood that there will be enough money in the capital programme. I can only go on what's in the report in front of us, of course, and knowing that things are looking a lot more rosy now, then, in all honesty, Chairman, I'd be quite happy to withdraw the amendment if you want to listen. Did you get that? Yeah. I said that in the light of the optimistic comments made by Mr Willis, I'll be more than happy to withdraw my amendment because obviously it sounds like there will be enough money to carry out the full programme. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gregory. That's in fact what I was asking here. Thank you very much for that. So we return then to the substantive issue, and I call on Councillor Johnston, please.
Thank you. I particularly wanted to come to an item on page 89 about asbestos removal. I have written to officers, but my attention was drawn to an issue in my ward this week. Somebody who should have a new bathroom, a new kitchen, and is waiting some time for it, but because of asbestos, it won't happen. If we're going to wait for every property to be void before we actually do the work, we're going to have a problem. And so I just wonder if the Cabinet Member for Housing could say what is happening. It's particularly flats at the top of Margate High Street, where the tenant advised me this week that he's waiting a long time for a kitchen and bathroom. I have contacted the head of service, but it seems to me because there has been asbestos removed in other properties, someone needed disabled facility and we had to wait for the asbestos and it cost us a lot more. But it is an issue with these old blocks. The other one I would draw attention to as well is when our council tenants pay for service charges, they pay their council tax, which means street cleaning and weed removal. I see very little weed removal in the front of any of the flats in my ward, and in fact the standard is quite poor at the moment. I'm sure you'd want to know about this. I'm sure it'll come up at your tenants' meetings. But if we're talking about our budgets and capital, it is all part of it. It is in here about cleaning contracts being renewed and being reviewed, and we're saving money. But are we saving money at a cost to our tenants? Thank you. Who in some cases are paying twice. Thank you.
Councillor Lynn Fairbrass, please.
I don't know what the actual, which ones are being done in which order. I do know that they're moving as fast as they can with the asbestos, but if you'd like to send me the details of particular tenants that you have worries about, then I will find out what's going on in that particular instance. As far as the contracts, there has just been a new service contract for the cleaning, and I think there were some issues with it originally, but I think those are all being ironed out now. But if there are, as I say, if there are problems in a particular area, let me know and I will look into it.
Thank you. Councillor Fenner, please.
Thank Thank you, Chair. My understanding is that in view of the drop in recycling, in the recycling rate, central government are expecting local authorities to develop their own policy. I note that residents have put a high priority on recycling in the consultation on the budget, and that TDC are obviously looking for ways to generate more income. I have been trying for several weeks, months, to have information about recycling here in Thanet, but I'm still waiting for it. Nonetheless, I can estimate that roughly it costs TDC around £40,000 a week to send waste to landfill sites. And obviously recycling also generates income, especially paper. So why is there nothing in this financial strategy about increasing recycling?
Willis. Were you signalling you wanted to speak, Mr. Willis?
No, don't.
I would just point Councillor Fenner to the capital programme. We have a vehicle replacement programme for the waste and recycling fleet, which is some investment. I'm never sure whether I'm supposed to stand as an officer or keep seated. And that's an example of where we're investing in the service through the capital programme, which won't be apparent from the revenue budgets that you see before you.
Thank you. Councillor Brim, please.
Thank you, Chair. We are currently undergoing a very comprehensive review in my portfolio, which is you're going to see changes over very soon, but that review is currently just about coming to an end, and so we've been scrutinising that as the new administration. So, yeah, that's that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As members are aware, I'm always here to help and assist where I can. And as such, I have a cunning plan for income generation. Not for this financial year, unfortunately, but for the future ones. What I think this council ought to consider is a spoof 15% increase in their precept with a referendum. Yeah, I understand this then generates a response from the DCLG. Yeah, now I caution here that when this correspondence does take place, you should get the right email address and text address. Otherwise, it could go to any nick. And I've even come up with a code name. You could call it Code Name Surrey.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. On the ball as usual.
Thank you for that suggestion. I would have to confess I had an equal amount of support in front of Mr Paul Carter on the same subject yesterday.
Councillor Taylor-Smith, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I don't think I can really follow Councillor Campbell on that, so I shall get down to the nitty-gritty as I always do, if I may. A couple of items to mention. Item 7, the budget consultation. Obviously, I personally think it's rather disappointing to only have 442 responses and 399 residents. I was one, and I hope all the other councillors in this room also responded. Yeah, maybe you didn't, but, you know, it would be nice to know if they actually responded online only, or whether there was a mixture of letters and maybe face-to-face or telephone calls, and what is being done to actually increase the participation or engagement, whichever word you choose. We can't use consultation very often these days. We have to use the correct words, I note, to improve that. Because it is important. I do jest, I know, but it is important. And of course, to see the services ranked as the highest priority yet again, household waste and recycling has been mentioned before, which I totally agree with, street cleaning and community safety. None of us can argue with that, as you know, they are corporate values after all. And secondly, in the recommendations at number 3, I would like to know if it's meant that members agree to reduction in the grant to minor preceptors as per section 2.15, or in fact, I think it's a typing mistake. I think it's actually 2.7 on page 77. And it would be nice to know, Mr. Chairman, of the amount of money here that is mentioned, 117,000 for parishes, how is that actually broken down? Because after all, not all of our district is parished, as we all know, and I would, for example, mention Margate. So any response would be gratefully received. Thank you.
Respond to that at this point?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it is a typographical error. It should be 2.17. I'm grateful to Councillor Taylor-Smith for that. The breakdown, I can write to the Councillor on that. I can provide a breakdown of the 117, but it isn't in the report. I can't point it to anywhere in the report. And in respect to 7.1 consultation, we were a bit disappointed. It's mixed. It's not just online or just telephone. It's mixed. And we were a bit disappointed, and we are seeking new ways to engage or consult with residents on financial matters in a more general way, not just on a one-off basis, but during the year in the lead up to next year's budget.
Councillor Wells?
Yes, thank you. My understanding is, I was just checking whilst Mr. Roos was talking, is that approximately 60% of those responses were on paper and 40% online.
Thank you. Councillor Bayford, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just 2 points, really. The first is I think we've got a constitutional crisis on our hands, because I think that when the amendment was withdrawn, I, as seconder, should have been asked if I agreed with it, and I didn't. So I think we have to rerun this entire debate from that point. If that's okay? The first debate. I'm not sure. Anyway, no. The other thing is that I thought that I was now so old that I would never do anything for the first time again. But I'm fine going to do that tonight. I'm actually going to vote as a member of the opposition for the budget. I haven't done it before, but feel tonight is the right thing to do. Reasons for that. The budget making process has been, I think, open and frank. Mr. Willis's workshops that he held were very, very useful. This budget has been to governance and audit, it's been to overview and scrutiny, and at those meetings, the hawk-eyed Councillor Ian Gregory has actually made points which have been incorporated into the budget. So I feel that in some part, the budget is ours as well. And it should be the Council's budget. I think this one is, so I'm going to vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bayford. Are there any other more comments before I return to Councillor Wells? Councillor Wells, please.
Thank you. I'll issue a correction now. I got those figures wrong way round, Councillor Taylor-Smith. It was 60% online and 40% on paper. I apologise for that. Thank you, Councillor Bayford, for your generous support. We have tried very hard to make sure that the budget process is as open and transparent as possible, and I'm glad that's been appreciated, and I'm grateful for your support for this particular budget. And I commend this budget to the Council.
Thank you. Councillor Townley, do you wish to sum up?
No, I'd like to thank Councillor Bayford once again for his support.
Thank you very much. Mr Howes, will you please conduct the recorded vote?
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Ashby. Councillor Bainbridge. Councillor Bayford. Councillor Braidwood. Councillor Brim. Councillor Buckley. Councillor Campbell. Councillor Keith Coleman-Cook. Councillor Connor. Councillor Crowe-Brown. Councillor Curran. Councillor Dawson. Councillor Day. Councillor Della. Councillor Dennis. Councillor Dexter. Councillor Dixon. Councillor Edwards. Councillor Eleanor. Councillor Evans. Councillor Jeremy Fairbrass. Councillor Lynn Fairbrass. Councillor Falcon. Councillor Fenner. Councillor Game. Councillor Ian Gregory. Councillor Ken Gregory. Councillor Grove. Councillor Hayton. Councillor Howes. Councillor J. Jones. Councillor Johnston. Councillor Larkins. Councillor Martin. Councillor Matterface. Councillor Parsons. Councillor Partington. Councillor Linda Piper. Councillor Reverend Stuart Piper.
Agreed.
Councillor Roy Potts. Councillor Linda Potts. Councillor Rogers. Councillor Rizeki. Councillor David Saunders. Councillor Maeve Saunders. Councillor Savage. Councillor Shonk. Councillor Stummer-Smirtsing. Councillor Taylor. Councillor Taylor-Smith. Councillor Tomlinson. Councillor Townend. Councillor Wells.
Thank you for that. It is a momentous occasion. Agenda item number 10 then is the appointment of the Council's external auditor for 2018-19 and onwards. Once more, Councillor Townend, please.
Thanks, Chair. Can't see. The current external audit contract expires in 2017-18, once the 2016-17 accounts are audited. There is a national collective scheme that could be commissioned that commissions external audit services on behalf of participating local authorities. This scheme, operated by the Public Sector Audit Appointments Limited, requires opting in by councils. Most councils are going in, and this report recommends that Thanet does so too. The main benefits of opting in to the collective scheme are that it provides commissioning expertise and capacity and offers increased purchasing power, especially given that there are very few potential suppliers of local authority audit services. I move that Council approves the recommendations.
Thank you. Is there a seconder, please?
I'll second.
Thank you, Councillor Fevras. Comment? Do members agree? Thank you. Agenda item number 11 then is the proposal to change the date of the 23rd of March 2017 meeting. I'll ask Mr. Howes, the Director of Corporate Governance and the Monitoring Officer, to explain what we're doing.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, there's a requirement that all the East Kent councils meet on the 22nd of March to discuss the East Kent merger report, and the council already has a meeting on the 23rd of March, so I'm recommending that we move the meeting, so the ordinary meeting, back from the 23rd of March to the 22nd of March. To do that, the council must suspend Council Procedure Rule 2.2, which says that council meetings will ordinarily be held on a Thursday. So they're the recommendations I propose.
Thank you, Mr. Howes. I move that the recommendation as set out in the report be adopted. Would the Vice Chairman please second?
Seconded.
Do members agree? Thank you very much. That concludes the business for the meeting of this council. Thank you very much, members.